So welcome everybody to my session on .NET Microservices MegaFun. Today, we're going to talk a lot about microservices and use a new tool called Project Tye that we're going to learn all about. A bit about me. I have been in tech for a really long time, about 18 plus years. I've pretty much still touched a lot of things across a lot of different tech stacks. Programming languages mainly are .NET, C#, JavaScript, Python now. So I'm expanding my base. I recently started a podcast called Disrupting the Cloud. I actually do work for Microsoft. I actually focus a lot on helping ISVs and startups move to the cloud. So I'm super excited to have everybody attend my session. And feel free to follow me or send questions or anything or whatever to me on my Twitter account at ChicksCanCode. You will see me tweeting a lot about cloud stuff and .NET stuff, and also football, American football, that is. So, cool. All right, so let's get started. So today we're gonna give like a little bit of a microservices refresher. I know maybe we're all familiar with microservices, but I feel like maybe we should just like all level set. Then we're going to talk about developing with microservices and deployment with microservices, and then I'll do a quick like wrap up. So what are microservices? It's interesting how everything always keeps coming back, right? So when I first started in tech, the coolest thing was like service-oriented architecture, and you deployed all of these services, WCF services, and the whole idea was in the enterprise, we could deploy all these services that were loosely coupled and discoverable and all those kind of things. So if you like grew up back in those days, all these terms will start to become familiar. So microservices are basically just independent modules that are deployed in a single action. It allows different parts of your application to be deployed separately, to be able to isolate points of failure in that way. One of the key things that I really like about microservices is that as a dev team, we can kind of choose our own adventure. So if different parts of our product team, for whatever reason, decides that our service is best written in Node, we can go ahead and deploy that service in Node. If there's another part of our application that is more better suited for another language like Python, we'll go ahead and deploy it in that. And so the other thing is that microservices, they enable autonomous scalability, and they're self-healing. So they're meant to be the whole kind of adage of, if one gets deployed and if there's something happens, it should be able to be self-healing and deploy and be able to be redeployed very easily. And for all those reasons, that means that we can actually deploy things a lot faster. There's a lot faster time to market to get things deployed, and the delivery of service, all those kind of great things. Like we make our customers happy, and everyone wins. Okay, so here's a problem though with microservices. One of the key things with microservices is that the more microservices that we have, the more problems that we encounter. So one of the things that we often see with, oops, sorry about that. just like, where's my slideshow not going? Anyway, we'll just stay right here. So one of the key things that we see about microservices, one of the big issues, is that it's typically very difficult to discover microservices easily. And because once we get a ton of microservices that get deployed. Sorry, one second. My dog decided to actually make an appearance after all this time of not being on air. So one of the things that we discover with microservices is that it's also very difficult. How do you deal with dependencies? So if I got a bunch of services that get deployed and I'm doing things like SQL databases, I've got dependencies for Redis cache, all of those things kind of over time as my microservices grow, make it super difficult to maintain and manage microservices. And I think one of the key things that at the very beginning when you're deploying and building out microservices, so from a project perspective, how do I architect this? How do I manage multiple projects? How do I manage deployment across multiple projects? So all of those things are make deployment and managing and getting started with microservices very difficult, at least in a lot of different circumstances. So I know a lot of people are interested in moving towards microservice architectures, but a lot of times they just kind of don't know where to start. And so I think that Project Tye is a really good way, if you, as a .NET developer, to kind of ease that transition from going more of a monolithic architecture to microservices. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about today how one of the more difficult things with microservices is really just dealing with all the different new tooling that you have to learn. So you've got to learn Helm charts, you've got to learn Kubernetes, you've got to learn Docker, you've got to learn Istio, you've got to learn about logging and Elastic, maybe you're using Elk Stack for logging, or all the different tools. And so there can quickly become kind of this sort of tool set overload. I think eventually you will get there, but I think that tool set overload starts to get a little bit much. And so today that becomes very difficult, especially if you're a beginner who's just kind of trying to try microservices out and see if that's right, if it's the right thing for your organization. So Docker Compose typically is a good solution to some of these problems and answers some of the things around dependencies. But again, there's a steep learning curve. There's a lot of heavy deployment and debugging that really makes it hard to try and run containers on your development machine. Okay. So, 1 second, this is really weird. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about deployment with Tye. So Tye is an experimental framework that was developed. That's what's happening. Okay. Sorry. So Tye is an experimental framework that's used for developing, testing, and deploying microservices across distributed applications. It is in experimental mode until November 2020, which means that the .NET team is trying things out. It's kicking the tires around Project Tye, but I wouldn't necessarily use it for production workloads, but definitely, as I said, as something that you want to use to try to use new infrastructure or test new deployments. Definitely highly recommend Project Tye as a way to kind of get started with microservices. Some of the cool things that it does is that it can run your Docker dependencies. It automatically gives you really cool dashboards for logging, for metrics, all locally. So local development and getting up to speed with microservices running locally is super simple, and we'll kind of go through that in the demo. And then you could also very easily deploy, Dockerize your microservices and then deploy to services like AKS and using the Azure Container Registry. And we'll kind of show some of that a little bit later. So let's talk about getting started with Tye. So it's actually, you only need 3 things. So you need .NET Core 3.1, also works with 5.0 if you're already on that bandwagon. You need Docker Desktop, and you need the Tye CLI, which you just install with the .NET tool install -g Microsoft.Tye. And that's really it. So it's really low barrier for entry and really easily, very quick to get started. All right, so I'm gonna just show a demo of getting started. Let's see. So this is an application that I have started working on. As I said, I'm actually starting a podcast. So one of the things that I really want to do is actually start deploying a web page that shows all our podcasts or whatever. So what I've done is I've sort of started a little bit. I've got my function. I've got a couple of function apps that I'll just show that they do nothing more than just fetch episodes or fetch information about our podcast. So I've got a function app. So here's one of my function apps. It's called Episodes Get. And all it's doing is I've got a service layer, and that service layer is just talking to a Cosmos DB. So at a high level, I've set up these services and made them kind of decoupled. And then I've deployed them, and then they will eventually get deployed. So I've got a couple of function apps. I've got one for episodes and one that deals with hosts. And then I've got a website, just the MVC or .NET Core web application that I just created. So it's pretty empty right now. Nothing there, just we're going to start working through it. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So to get started with Tye, the first thing that we want to do is we're going to bring up a command prompt, and we're going to just type Tye init. And so what that is going to do is it's going to create a YAML file. You can see it here, created Tye.yaml. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that file. And the YAML file is really, if you have worked with Helm charts or anything, it's just a definition of that YAML file of your services. So, but it does this using convention and using inspection and discovery. So here's my YAML file. So it's already kind of figured out that I've got one web application, and it's discovered this service, it's discovered it there, name, and then what project it references. So that's great. And so we'll continue to add to that. So now I'm just going to type Tye build. And then what this is going to do is start building and out my containers. You can see it's actually building out my project. It's going to build my Docker image, and it's going to publish that out to Docker. So actually, I could run Docker. So actually, I could run Docker images here. And then you can see like, here's a couple of the image that just got deployed. Well, I had it already set up, but here's the image that got created and installed into Docker. Okay, awesome. So next thing that I'm going to do is, now that I've got my Docker image built, I'm going to actually just do. So now I'm going to do Tye run. And what this is going to do is actually now deploy and get my application starting to run. So it's looking at my YAML file, it's building projects that it needs, and then it's got a dashboard already set up for me. So I'm going to go here. Dashboard. Okay, so here I've got a nice dashboard that's already set up. It's already got my DTC web. It sort of shows you kind of a bunch of metrics about what's inside of that container. It shows the bindings, so it's set up localhost. And then it also even shows kind of logs. So all like look ma no hands, I've got I just created a web application. I ran a couple command lines, and I've already got container pushed to Docker. I've got a dashboard set up, and I'm off and running. So that is awesome. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and like show. So it's pushed this DTC web out to this page. And if I go here, yeah, so not a lot of really interesting things yet, but we will work on that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go over to my YAML file here. And what I want to do is actually connect my my Azure function backend. And I'll share that there's a really nice schema for this. In the GitHub for top Project Tye, and I'll kind of show that at the end. So I've got my backend. I'm going to give it a name. And that just tells it that it's a function app. And then I'm going to just give the name for my function app, TC function app episodes. Okay, cool. So now I've got my project, my YAML file updated, and then I've got it connected now to another service, to my Azure function backend. Note, you could actually connect this if you just created like a regular web API or any other kind of API. You could do the same thing. In fact, actually, it would have discovered it. So if I had created a web API project, and for my backend, I could have easily connected this. So this is just, in this YAML file, you're going to put all of your services that you're connected to. If you're using things like Postgres or Redis cache, you can set up all of that here. All of your connection strings and other things would be connected right in your YAML file. All right, so next up, what I'm going to do is just show I've got set up my client to communicate with my backend, which I think I already did. Oh, better save this. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do here is I've got this podcast client, and it's pretty straightforward. Basically, what I'm going to do is set up a HTTP client. I've set up use dependency injection to insert a client in the config. I've got this. So as we talked about with Project Tye, it uses service discovery using naming conventions. So basically what I've set up is this base address. So I've set up this base address, and I'm calling like .get service URI to that backend service because I named it backend. That's in my YAML file. And then basically, I'm just calling to my Azure functions on the backend. I'm going to get a list of episodes. I'm going to just call my API/episodes, and then respond and just deserialize the results into my episode object. Just right quick. So I've defined just a bunch of models that define my episodes. So just like familiar things that you might think of for a podcast. So name, publish date, etc. All right, cool. So now the next thing that I want to do, I've got my podcast client established. So the next thing that I want to do is in my actual page, in my index page, I want to actually set up my onGet function. So what I'm going to do here is first, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just and I'm actually just going to call here to get my podcast client. Okay. And then all I have to do is just set my episodes. So, and then I have this get episodes async. And that's pretty much it. All right, cool. So now I'm actually in my index page, and in my code behind, I'm just calling my client to return my episodes. All right, so that's all awesome and groovy. So last thing that I want to do is I just got to write some stupid HTML code, which that's pretty boring. So and I don't want to like waste too much time. So I'm gonna use the magic of copy and paste here to set that up, right? So I've just got set up a little HTML with a table. Super boring, but super cool. All right, cool. So now that I've got my front end set up, I've set up my YAML file. Now I should be able to, I'm gonna run that Tye, actually, I'm gonna just close this so I can just do Tye build and Tye run again. Okay. So now I'm gonna do Tye build. You can see again, it's like pushing out my project, and it's building out my container. And now it's actually going to set up building out my Docker images. And now it's actually going to be, because I've added that service in the backend. So it doesn't actually have a, so this error or this warning says, hey, you have a service defined called backend, but it doesn't have a project associated. Because remember, Project Tye is trying to, through inference and project discovery, will try to create Docker images. So right now, it's not supported to automatically build a Docker image for your function. There are techniques that you can do, but it's just not automagical right now. So cool. So it did my build. So now I'm gonna do, so now I'm gonna just run it again. So same thing. So you can see it's building my project, it's getting it all set up, it's all groovy, and yay. All right, so cool. So now let's go back out to our page here. So I'm just gonna reload that just so everybody could see. So now you can actually see now it's connected my other service, my function backend. Again, I could see kind of, again, not so much cool there, but I could see logs of all that's happening, and I'll actually show. So it's setting up Azure storage, it's doing all the function core CLI stuff. So all that's really available. It even shows like, hey, you know, here's all your functions set up. So great, perfect. So now what I'm going to do is now just probably my URL changed. I think so. All right, so now let's go ahead and go out to my server, and if the demo gods, everybody pray for the demo gods, we should see my list of, I've got a little small error there, but here's my just list of my podcasts coming back from my Cosmos DB. And then if I actually come over here to my logs, I can actually see where that HTTP request to my Azure functions. So you saw it's calling episodes get. It was called via this REST API. And then, you know, you could see things that everything was successful, got a 200 response, which is why I was able to see this. So actually, you know, in very limited amount of additional code and wiring up things, I was able to build and set up and connect both my front end and my back end together, running serverless and in containers. So super, super, super easy thing to do. So cool. Let's go back to go back to my PowerPoint. So yeah, so super, super simple using Project Tye. So let's just talk a little bit about deployment. So there's sort of two trains of thoughts when you're deploying microservice architecture. So you could either go serverless, or you can go containers, or you could kind of go both. There's benefits to both. So serverless obviously gives you scale and ease of entry, and you can scale up and scale down your applications. But containers are also really great for things like if I have very old legacy applications. So let's say my front end that I built, let's say it was a very old .NET application that I just wanted to containerize. So I often work with customers, and we actually end up using both deployment methods. So it's something that I just wanted to bring up because that's actually what the demo showed. So basically on my front end, I will be deploying it to as a container and deploying it into AKS. And then on the back end, I'm actually using Serverless to host functions. And because every presentation that I do always has to have some kind of Visio diagram, it would not be complete. This is kind of at a high level what we would be deploying. So I've got my actual web application being deployed in AKS. Once you once you do deploy with Tye, it'll deploy it into container registry and connect it to Kubernetes service. Super simple. And then I'll actually have my services, backend services, all deployed in inside Azure Functions and using things like API management to keep that all clean. Let's see. So let's see, we've got about 10 more minutes, 10 or 15 more minutes left. So let's talk a little bit about deployment steps. So once you've got your application set up with Project Tye, actually it's simple to actually get it started up and deployed. So what you would do is go into Azure. You can go into the Azure portal, and I'll show that what I've got set up. So you create an Azure container registry, and then you create a Kubernetes service and integrate that with your container registry. And then you can use Tye deploy -- interactive to actually deploy it. And what it'll do is walk you through the steps to deploy to your container registry. You could push this a little bit further because it is a command line tool. You could obviously incorporate things like CI/CD. So I could create a GitHub action to deploy it, or use DevOps pipelines to have everything kind of automatically deployed as well. Let's just see. I was having a couple of issues with deployment today. May not work. Because I've been moving some stuff around with cube control. We'll see. We'll see. We'll pray to the demo gods on this one. But eventually what it should start doing is, I've been having some troubles with connecting to my cluster. So what it should be doing is it should start asking you, I've set up a ACR and I've set up Kubernetes cluster. So it should have asked me that, but I've having a little bit of trouble because my queue control is not properly configured because I've been changing some stuff around for other projects. So we'll show that. The other thing that I just wanted to do to help kind of everyone get started, if you go out to aka.ms/Tye, you can see the GitHub repo. Definitely highly encourage people to get started, and just very, very simple. There's tons of samples So there's a couple of really cool samples. I kind of covered the Azure Functions one. There's a really good sample around Dapr and integration. So one of the great announcements that came out during the conference this past week was around further Dapr integration with Azure Functions. So definitely this is a good sample. I just wanted to show here as an example. I should probably make this just a teensy bit bigger. Yeah. Just want to kind of show a more built out example of what that YAML file would look like when you're running things, running like something like a Dapr example. So here's kind of all my services, and this would probably be done. This would be built out during the inspection, and then when you do init, but then you could set up something like Redis cache and set up your port bindings here. And then this is where I would set up my Dapr for integration as well. Okay. Let's see. Wanted to show a couple of more things. So this is a pretty good example as well around using Nginx ingress controllers with Kubernetes. So you could set up your AKS cluster and then have an Nginx ingress controller there. So that's kind of just, and this also shows setting up that with bindings and volumes. Let's see. I think those are a couple of good examples. There's a ton of other examples here that I would highly encourage people to take a look at. Let's see. What else? So just a couple of other things that I wanted to just throw out as you think more about building microservices and deploying them. So one of the things that you'll quickly think about or encounter as you deploy microservices is really how do I build kind of a unified layer for communication across all of my microservices. And you can see that this one is kind of like, so if I do direct client to microservice communication versus having more of what's called an API gateway architecture. And what this means is it's basically giving you kind of a unified communication layer. So across all of your applications, you can have kind of this unified interface for then all of your microservices to kind of have a pass-through layer. And I'm a big fan of doing something like this because what it does is it gives you a unified layer. It helps with how you release different microservices. And then you can do things like creating developer portals and publisher portals that make your microservices much easier to interact with. So definitely think about using some kind of API gateway tool. API gateway doesn't have to be API management. It could be, there's a lot of ways to doing this, but I highly encourage people to always use some kind of API gateway in front of all of their microservices. I think we'll go. So I just got a couple more minutes. So I just wanted to come across provide just a couple of different resources. So as I mentioned, you can go out to aka.ms/Tye to learn more about Project Tye. Definitely the team is looking for feedback on the product and getting started. So that would be great. You can go out to learn more about functions if you're not familiar, and for API management. And then I also just, and I'll post some of these GitHub samples that my team put together around microservices and reference architectures around that, and some things that we've done with there as well. So I actually got done like 3 minutes early. So I didn't.
Yay, well done.
I know, like on like slightly under time. So I didn't see too many questions. I did see one. Oh,
yeah, I can be your router. How could you build? This is from Anonymous. How could you build the API for others to subscribe to?
So I'm not quite sure. So when you say for others to subscribe to, so do you mean for like other clients to subscribe to it? If so, oh yeah. So for build, so basically you would expose that API. And I kind of showed like you could expose it, using some kind of unified API gateway to expose all of your APIs for consumers to consume. I see another one around Tye versus Dapr, which is a great question. So Project Tye is really more, one, Project Tye is exclusively for .NET microservices. And to me, what I see Project Tye as being something to help with accelerating, pushing microservices into containers, for pushing it into Docker, helping you kind of streamline build and deployment. Build and deploying microservices. Dapr is something I would use on top of Project Tye, where you would actually be dealing with kind of distributed services. So I would use Project Tye for kind of deployment, and then Dapr for kind of handling distribution across several different like discrete events. So someone was asking about communication between services. That's where I would kind of see Dapr and Project Tye. So you don't, and Dapr is agnostic. So you can use Dapr with anything. Project Tye, is strictly for .NET. So someone asked if I had my own podcast, could I use this too? So actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. So you guys are seeing me build my podcast website. I'm actually planning to probably next week start building out my podcast website on YouTube. So you guys got kind of you all got the first, I guess, taste of it. But I will be blogging and probably doing a couple of YouTube posts on that as well. So I'll share that content as it gets built out. So yeah, but definitely I do plan to make this a platform that's reusable. So cool.
Anonymous asks, so at some point Tye could integrate with integrate with OpenShift? That's what they use at my day job. I'm still trying to synthesize. Thanks.
So Tye, unfortunately, is pretty tightly coupled. So what I could envision, what would be cool, and I think that's really great feedback, is that it's pretty tightly coupled to Microsoft tools. But I would love in that Tye deploy, if you could have if we could provide different deployment mechanisms. So right now it's really pretty, because it's really new, it's really pretty tightly coupled to AKS and that sort of deployment path, but I could definitely see it being used for across other things like OpenShift, and that's actually really good feedback. Any other questions? 12 whole minutes. I feel like I feel like if we were in person, this would be like awesome, because then like typically when you're the last person, that would be something where people would be able to stress and decompress and then be able to go for start happy hour. So I don't know. I'm happy to go over to Discord. I've got some links and some other things that I could share with people as well. I'm happy we could wrap up early, because Lee, what do we have coming up? There's something at 5:30, right?
There is. It's just for the speakers, yeah.
Oh, for speakers. Okay. Yep. Oops. But yeah, I will be on Discord. If anyone has any other kind of discussion or any other questions, I'm happy to continue to chat there.
Awesome. Thanks, LaBrina.
Okay. All right. Woo, thanks. And also, I want to say thanks to everyone for attending the Cloud Track. Throughout the day, we had some really great talks. I'm kind of, that's the only thing, like being a moderator, you kind of get bummed. I'm kind of bummed because I missed some other talks and other tracks that I wanted to hear, but luckily they'll all be recorded and I'll be able to listen, so that's great. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna head over to Discord if anyone, and I'll post the links and the GitHub and everything there. All right.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks everyone.
And I'm gonna end this. Unless you want to.
Are you hitting you're hitting a big red button?
It's scary. Yeah, I'm gonna do it though.
No.